When flying and supporting Russian ground troops, the Russian armed forces continue to use this defensive tactic. In the opening days of the invasion, Russia suffered catastrophic losses on both aircraft, cavalry, and infantry units in the bid to take Kyiv. The losses came as a shock to the Russian officer who was in charge, and they found that something had to change. In support of ground operations, Russian Ka-52, Hokum-B, and Mi-28 Havoc helicopters started using unguided 80mm caliber rockets in an unusual manner. The maneuver begins with the helicopters flying at low level, then pulls up into a steep climb and launches the rockets at the top of their flight path parabolic arc, sending them downrange. Emerging footage then shows the gunships releasing flares to counter IR-guided man-portable air defense systems and braking hard and diving down to lower altitude to avoid being killed by the air defense systems. Although it was rarely seen prior to the Ukrainian conflict, the tactic is now part of the Russian helicopter pilot training syllabus and is described, for example, in the Mi-24 handbook. The tactic described above, which converts Russian helicopters into airborne MLRS, or multiple launch rocket system, extends the range of the rockets but is far more accurate and could only be used effectively against soft area targets that do not require accuracy or to put psychological pressure on the enemy. It resembles the toss bombing used by tactical aircraft to deliver nuclear weapons during the Cold War era. The aircraft approach the target at low altitude and high speed to avoid detection by enemy radars and interception by enemy fighters. The aircraft would begin a pull-up into a half loop at a distance calculated by the onboard computer, which would take airspeed, altitude, and gyroscopic inputs and determine the release point for the desired ballistic path. At 45 degrees for low toss, or 90 degrees for high toss as shown in the video, the weapon, with an upward vector, would be automatically released during the steady climb. Once released, the bomb would travel in a ballistic arc toward the target. The toss technique was not overly precise, but it was accurate enough to destroy the intended target with a nuclear weapon. Despite the fact that the Ka-52 fire control system is capable of performing this type of NLOS, or non-line of sight launch, and providing the crew with a roughly accurate launch solution, this type of attack is far more accurate. The Ka-52, along with the Mi-28s, is Russia's premier frontline combat helicopters, with both advanced targeting systems and accurate air-to-ground television guided missiles. Yet, we continue to see these employ rockets, which for all practical purposes are dumb weapons, which is hugely affected by winds and range. On the other hand, this attack profile allows the gunships to hit from a greater distance while remaining low and potentially out of range of Ukraine's lethal air defense systems. Russia has struggled in the use of combined operations to support ground troops' advance. This may come as a lack of secure communications between units. But from analyzing recent deployments into Ukraine, we notice a lack of coordination and planning between the air and land components of the mission. The consequence of this could be that the aviation regiments do not have enough faith in the ground forces to not be shot down by their own, and thus resorts to staying well away from the front lines to avoid shooting and being shot by friendly forces. It is also part of the public Russian doctrine to support infantry operations with heavy artillery and has little mention of what the West knows as close air support, which is direct airborne support to fighting units on the ground. According to the Russians, the Ka-52 has destroyed fortified strongpoints and firing positions of armored vehicles from Ukraine's armed forces, where Army aviation crews launched guided and unguided missiles in pairs from low altitudes, destroying camouflaged command posts and AFU units, strong points. From these statements, we can derive that the helicopter operations are typically favored to operate along the front and not directly at it, and target pre-planned targets. To a much lesser extent, targets of opportunity are being engaged, as that would require the helicopters to scout from a more vulnerable altitude and position, and secondly, to have direct communication with infantry on the ground and be confident enough in the communication to be able to sort enemy from friendly forces. As you can imagine, this requires training and currency, of which we have seen little of in the prelude to war. Therefore, we can expect more videos to surface showing helicopters from both sides using this technique to toss rockets away to suppress entire areas of supposed enemy activity. So far, the Russian aerospace forces in Ukraine have lost 8 advanced Ka Alligator helicopters. Some were reportedly shut down by manpads, others destroyed by Bayraktar TB2 drones, and others damaged and abandoned.